Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. It is great to have you in on this Black Friday. Anybody who's been out there, shopping since this morning or doing some online shopping, which, I kind of went on a big rant at the end of Wednesday's show about how I don't see the point in going out and shopping when the same deals are online. I don't know. Maybe it's just some people feel like they need to see in person, which, listen, to each their own. But we do have a great show for you guys today. Obviously going to discuss all three Thanksgiving games, all three highly fascinating. Two of them going down to the wire. One, the middle one between Dallas and the New York Giants, which I'll talk about in just a second, was competitive up until about the 4 or 5 minute mark. I'll discuss that. Also, my man Patrick Brown from the Khaotic Sports Podcast is going to be joining the show for the first time. Look forward to having him on to discuss all things NFL, including yesterday's 3 Thanksgiving games, as well as the Zach Wilson benching and everything in between. So looking forward to have him on the show. You guys are going to really, really like this guy. I will say before I get into my first segment today, I am wearing, it's appropriate, my Aisha Curry Can Cook t-shirt. I figured it was appropriate considering the fact that it's the day after Thanksgiving. This is, of course, from the NBA Finals when Boston Celtics fans had the audacity to say that a world-renowned chef and a New York Times best-selling author of numerous cookbooks cannot, in fact, cook. And of course, Steph and Aisha's PR team got to work, and hey, we got a t-shirt. And this t-shirt did, in fact, go to a good cause. So, hey, everybody's winning. Let's start with the team that is definitely winning right now, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. They beat the New York Giants yesterday by a final score of 28-20. It was a very strange game because you're talking about a Cowboys offense that dropped 40 on the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday afternoon in Minneapolis to this first half against the New York Giants. They only score 7 points and have a lot of self-inflicted wounds. But the Giants, in particular, Daniel Jones, turned back into Daniel Jones, albeit, I'll give the Giants some break here. They were missing 4 offensive linemen. Okay, so Daniel Jones didn't have a whole lot of time to throw to begin with. And by the way, the receiving core is very, very shallow. But I thought about this for the Dallas Cowboys, and I'll talk about Dak a little later on, talk about the defense later on. Here's what concerns me. Yeah, I said 2 things, and I always do this. I started doing it last last January going into the playoffs. I'm going to do it this coming January because I think it's very, very fascinating to see a team's biggest flaw, in particular a playoff team's biggest flaw, that will in all likelihood end their season in January, or in one team's case, February. Like that one glaring flaw that eventually somebody is going to expose, right? And for the Cowboys, I said it's 2 major things. A is not being able to stop the run. Well, for whatever reason, the Giants didn't seem to commit to the run whatsoever yesterday, which maybe that was because they had 4 offensive linemen down. That's the only thing I can figure. But you've got Saquon Barkley, who's averaging, 115 yards from scrimmage all season long coming into this game. Rely on him. He is your offense. And that's what's gotten, and Brian Dable's done a great job with the Giants this year, and I still do believe that they're a playoff team. But that's what Brian Dable's gotten himself into trouble with over the last couple of weeks, last couple of games against Detroit and Dallas, is I don't know if he feels like he has to either build Daniel Jones' confidence or, put him in position to where the Giants organization could say, hey, that's our franchise quarterback. He's not. He's fine. He is, Daniel Jones to me is a low-end starter, high-end backup. He is the guy, if put in the perfect situation, yeah, he can get you to the playoffs if everything is perfect. But if you ask him to go win a game, it's a disaster. And that's what happened with Daniel Jones yesterday and against the Lions on Sunday. So I don't know why the Giants, for whatever reason, didn't really seem to commit to the run all that much. I mean, Saquon Barkley had 11 carries. Come on. That's Saquon Barkley. That guy's possibly in line to be the offensive player of the year. And you give him 11 carries. Now, they threw him a few passes as well, but give that guy the football. So Dallas, for the last 2 games, has been bailed out by questionable coaching. Sunday against Kevin O'Connell, and then Thursday against Brian Dable, in terms of neither committed to the run, despite having elite running backs against a run defense that isn't very good. As a matter of fact, I think coming into this game, they were like 29th in run defense. That is bad. That's a major flaw that could get exposed for the Cowboys later on. And the second thing, which I really want to focus on, what could get the Cowboys beat down the road, and what is the biggest reason, all in all, that I say this team is not going to go to the Super Bowl. They contender? Sure, they're a contender, but I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl. Heck, I have high doubts that they even get to the NFC Championship game, which, of course, as everybody knows, they haven't done since the Dynasty years back in 1995. You look at that stat sheet, look at that box score. You look down here. Okay, let's see. You got yards per play, passing, rushing, red zone. Oh, there's that big glaring stat. Penalties. Dallas Cowboys, 13 penalties for 86 yards. Now, a lot of those were holding, illegal contact, a ton of false starts. Tyler Smith Tyler Smith has been really good this season. He's actually quite surprised me a little bit. But as I warned the Cowboys when they took him in the first round of this year's NFL draft, I said this is a risky pick because the talent is obviously there. The upside is there. Guy has the talent to be a multi-time Pro Bowler as a left tackle in this league. However, as I beat this desk over and over, he was the most penalized player in college football last year. And he's reverting back to his old ways again. And I said, that's the worst combination of the world to bring the most penalized player in college football on a Mike McCarthy coach team. That does not seem like a match made in football heaven, if you ask me. And he had a rough afternoon against Kayvon Thibodeau. I know everybody's making a big deal about he has 1 sack this year. Folks, if you're watching the Giants and you're watching their defense, Kayvon Thibodeau's getting to the quarterback. They're missing some holding calls. Either the quarterback's gotten the ball out of his hands quickly. I thought Kayvon Thibodeau, who I loved out of Oregon in the draft, played excellent yesterday. But it's those penalties that are going to cost Dallas down the road. You can commit 13 penalties against a lower end playoff team like the Giants. Like, let's say Washington sneaks into the playoffs. You can get away with that. Say Atlanta made some kind of crazy run and got in the playoffs. You can get away with that against Atlanta. You can't get away with that against the San Francisco 49ers or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or against the Philadelphia Eagles. Can't get away with it against those teams. And Mike McCarthy said after the game, we're going to fix it. We got to fix the penalties. Okay. I'm going to be paying very, very close attention over the next, let's see, they're 8-3, so that's 11 games. So the last 6 games of the regular season leading into the playoffs, especially the last 3 games for Dallas. Because these next 3, they're trap games, but they should win them all. Colts, led by Jeff Saturday, 1-win Texans, 3-win Jaguars. They should win all 3 of those games. Should win, not saying they will win. Their last 3, Philadelphia, which could shape up to be one of the most important games of the NFL season. At Tennessee, Mike Vrabel versus Mike McCarthy. Who do you trust? Derrick Henry versus that Cowboys rush defense. Who do you trust? And then they finished with Washington at Washington at the end of the year. Paying very close attention because he's got him on tape now. Got Mike McCarthy on tape. We are going to clean up the penalties. Let's see. That's something that scares me a little bit for the Cowboys down the road. You guys know I'm obviously not a Cowboys fan. I'm a Dak fan, as I am, of course, wearing his hat today after a really good performance, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But it's something that I think the Cowboys need to focus on, moving forward. And again, I will say this, and I sort of talked about it on Wednesday's show when I predicted this game. I said Tony Pollard is the number 1 back. I don't know what more he needs to prove to show that he's the number 1 back. That said, that was one of the most impressive games that I've seen Zeke play in the last 2-3 years. We all know since he signed the contract, he's had some down games, down seasons. And that is if you compare him to his first 3 years. I mean, his yards per carry up until this year has went down every single year since his rookie year. Some of it is he had a ton of carries, a lot of mileage going back to his days at Ohio State. Cowboys ran the ball with him a lot his first 2-3 years in the league. And now that they've become more trusting of Dak, now that they've added a few more weapons here and there, now that Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator, and being a quarterback, he is pass happy at times, gets himself to trouble occasionally. Zeke's, production has gone downhill in some way. But I love the way Zeke played yesterday. He ran hard. He hit the holes as quick as you would want him to. I thought he did a really good job in pass blocking, which I've always said this about Zeke. He's one of the best running backs in football when it comes to pass blocking. Okay, he does not care to take punishment if it means protecting his quarterback, which respect, because there's some running backs that are even Zeke's size that don't want that smoke with a big 300-pound defensive lineman or a linebacker coming full speed in a blitz. They don't want that smoke. Zeke does. And that's what makes him a great leader and a great talent for this Cowboys team. But shifting for a moment to The guy who I'm, of course, a big supporter of. You know his name. You could say it with me if you so choose. Let's say it together, folks. Rain Dakota Prescott. Now, I know, listen, was his performance yesterday as good as the one against Minnesota? Well, no, it's hard to top a 93 QBR. It's hard to top a 139 passer rating. But I love it. How Twitter, how Dak critics always pinpoint the bad plays and totally ignore the good plays. So Dak Prescott in the first half, and check my Twitter. Listen, I'm a Dak fan, but I'm objective. Check my Twitter. I said Dak did not play well in the first half. You look at his numbers, 10 for 16, 116 yards, 2 interceptions. The second one was not on him. I heard Shannon Sharp describe it this morning. He broke down the play in vivid detail. The second one was a miscommunication between Dak and CeeDee Lamb. Nevertheless, 2 interceptions, little over 100 yards, not the greatest completion percentage. But what do all the great players do? If they have first halves, they respond in the second half. That's what the great players do. That's what the great quarterbacks in the National Football League do. In the second half, Dak Prescott, 11 for 14, which is a 79% completion percentage. That's pretty good. I think you'll take that. 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not to mention, he had a couple throws. The first touchdown to Schultz was beautiful. Off his back foot. Okay, it's 3rd and 15. It's 3rd and goal from the 15, I should say, and puts it only where his tight end can go up and get it. It's a great throw by Dak. Great job by Schultz. High pointing the football. Touchdown Cowboys. And then later on in the game, okay, where he fumbles a snap, gets rid of it quick, hits Ferguson, who, by the way, had a big game, had that crazy hurdle in the fourth quarter over the Giants defensive back. He played very well yesterday. Okay, I'm not so sure Ferguson should be the guy over Schultz at this stage in time, but that's another discussion for another show. And then, to me, his best throw, off his back foot with Kayvon Thibodeau coming in and just crushes him in the backfield and delivers a perfect throw to CeeDee Lamb. You know, you hear a lot of talk about, remember the narrative? I heard this from a lot of people, some Cowboys fans even, that we're not saying Cooper Rush is better than Dak Prescott. We're not saying that, but he runs the offense better. He's more efficient. He plays within the offense better than Dak Prescott. Does he now? Well, that's funny. With Cooper Rush, the Dallas Cowboys were 23rd in offense. Since Dak has returned, they're 1st in points. Okay, 23rd in points with Cooper Rush. Since Dak's returned, they're 1st in points. Total yards with Cooper Rush, they ranked 27th in the NFL out of 32 teams. That's not very good. With Dak, 3rd. Passing yards, they ranked 27th with Cooper Rush, with Dak 6th. And 3rd down percentage with Cooper Rush, 29th, with Dak 1st. Just let that sink in for a moment. That's now 10 straight wins for Dak Prescott against the New York Giants. He has yet to lose to them since Barack Obama was president. Just a little context for you there. They've also played 5 games since he's returned. They are plus 80 in point differential with Dak. And also, just want to throw this out there. I mentioned the 1st in points and 1st and 3rd down percentage. They're also 1st in points per drive. I don't know. Crazy me. I've always said this about Dak. If he's top 10 in wins since he came into the NFL, if he's top 10 in stats since he came into the NFL, and he's, for the 2nd straight year, leading the best offense in football, he's probably a top 10 quarterback. I'm just crazy me. Maybe I read too much into numbers. Maybe I watch the games too closely. I don't know. Maybe I should just go off what some of these knuckleheads on Twitter say. Maybe that's what I should do from here on out. But I don't know. If you watch the games and you look at the box score, I'm just saying. I mean, what blows me away, and I'll talk about the Bills and the Lions later on the show. I'll get to that. But sort of a sneak peek of that, I didn't think Josh Allen played all that well yesterday against one of the worst defenses in football. Okay? Dak threw for more yards than Josh Allen, same amount of touchdowns, better QBR, better passer rating. You tell me, against a 7-3 team, you wouldn't take 21 for 30, 261, 2 touchdowns, 71 QBR, 91 passer rating. Is that Dak's best performance? Absolutely not. One of the best performances of Dak's career happened just this past Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. But when it really mattered, that's when franchise quarterbacks, that's when top 10 quarterbacks do what they're supposed to do. On time, on target, commanding the offense at a high level, taking hits in the pocket, pushing the ball down the field, converting on third down. I mean, you saw Brett Maher, which, by the way, so sorry for Cowboys fans or for anybody who bet Cowboys -10. And the Giants had that little backdoor cover with that last-second touchdown to make it 28-20. But we saw Brett Maher miss that kick, which would have made it 31-13 at that point in time. Who's to say if Dak doesn't convert that third down to CeeDee Lamb, who, by the way, I've been hard on CeeDee Lamb this season. He played exceptionally yesterday. But who's to say if Dak doesn't hit CeeDee Lamb with that third down on the first drive of the second half, that Brett Maher misses the kick, it stays 13-7, and who knows what happens. So props to Dak Prescott. If I had to give him a letter grade, I'd probably give him a B+. B+, A-, considering the fact that he did play from behind. He did what people, for some weird reason, don't think he can do, and that's beat winning teams. Dominated New York in the second half, was accurate. Again, strong leadership once again. And again, I have been brutal on CeeDee Lamb this season. I said he has yet to show me that he's a number one receiver in the NFL. This game, it's a good sign. It's a good sign for Cowboys fans. CeeDee Lamb, 6 catches, 106 yards. Possibly could have been 7 catches for 100 and whatever yards and a touchdown. Debatable whether or not that should have been called a touchdown or not in the back of the end zone. It's kind of a go-either-way play. But doing his best Odell impression, which, by the way, the Cowboys are set to meet Odell, I think, on December 5th, if I'm not mistaken. But when you talk about the guys that needed to step up for the Cowboys, the stars, quote-unquote, they wear the star on their helmet, they stepped up. Dak stepped up. Zeke stepped up. CeeDee Lamb stepped up. And as usual, breaking news, Micah Parsons stepped up. 2 more sacks. I think I read this is the 9th time in his career, which, by the way, folks, he's in his 2nd NFL season. It's the 9th time in his career that he's had 2 or more sacks in a game, which is, I think, a third of the games he's played, he's had 2 or more sacks. That's unheard of. But you're talking about his speed, his size, his agility. He's everything you want in an outside linebacker and in a pass rusher. So Micah played well. But again, for the Dallas Cowboys, what concerns me moving forward is 2 things. They cannot stop the run, and the penalties are going to come back to bite them. Because when you play Kyle Shanahan and when you play Tom Brady and the Philadelphia Eagles, you better be buttoned up, or you're not beating them in a 60-minute postseason game, win or go home. Home or road. Because we've seen Dallas doesn't have that much of a home field advantage. As we saw last year against the 49ers in the playoffs, there were more Niners fans there than Cowboys fans. At least that's what it felt like. Like when when Dak went down and they didn't get that last snap off, okay? And the ref came out there and said the game is over. And you heard you heard the crowd go crazy. It's like, dang, are they in Santa Clara or Dallas? I can't. Santa Clara or Arlington, Texas. I couldn't tell. But certainly a good win for the Cowboys. They beat a 7-3 team. They're still very live for the NFC East and, frankly, for the number 1 seed. And they took care of business. We do have a comment here. I was going to bring this up on the show, but I appreciate this. It says, the United States football team is surprising many people. Play better against Wales and against England. I see a bright future for American football and the MLS League. Yeah, I watched that match. When did it start? 2 p.m. here Eastern, where I'm on the East Coast of the United States. Exciting draw. Okay, listen, for a game that didn't have a single goal, no score, highly exciting draw. So that means, which, by the way, most people thought England would win the game. They did not. We got a draw, 2nd straight, obviously kind of an underachieving performance against Wales. But for United States men's national team, obviously talk about the World Cup for those that are wondering. It all is going to come down to Tuesday, I think 2 Eastern, if I'm not mistaken, against Iran. Beat Iran, you get out of group play and you advance, which will be huge, obviously, for the United States. This World Cup has been crazy. You've had some just unbelievable upsets. There was a goal, I think, was it yesterday? I think it was, that was just I think it was by a Brazilian player. That was just fantastic. This World Cup has been highly entertaining. And that's the thing about the U.S. team, too, is that they've got the third youngest team in the entire cup. So, and Pulisic's obviously been fantastic, but bring these guys back 4 years from now, 2026, continue to develop the soccer organization over here. We got a chance to possibly compete with the big boys like the Frances of the world or the Brazils. Could be very, very fascinating moving forward to see what happens. But I think it's interesting. I think when you look at Dallas in terms of where they stack up against the contenders in the NFC, that's to me what holds them back. They're better top to bottom. Their roster. I mean, you could argue it's kind of a push between them and Tampa because Tampa's got some ballers. I still think Evans is one of the best receivers in the National Football League. I still think guys like Devin White, although he didn't have the greatest game a few games back, but he played phenomenally against the Seattle Seahawks. He was fantastic. And then obviously, listen, when you got Tom Brady, Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr., as one famously dubs him, you've always got a shot. I think we've all, over the last 23 years, learned better. By this point in time, by 2022, don't bet against that guy. But it's gonna be a very, very fun finish down the stretch. Last 7 weeks. Let's see, we're in week 12, so 6 weeks of the season. We got some great games on Sunday, which I'll predict in just a second. Hoping to get Patrick Brown on the show pretty soon. I don't know if there's any connection issues or whatnot, but hoping to get Patrick Brown, the host of the Khaotic Sports Podcast, on the show. Let's see. But it's going to be interesting. I think you're going to enjoy his takes. His podcast is excellent. Again, the Khaotic Sports Podcast. Go check it out. But while we wait for him to get on here, I did want to touch a little bit on that Bills-Lions game. I'll tell you, Detroit gets a Thanksgiving game every year, but this one was interesting. And when I saw that line, Bills minus 9.5, I said, if this game was on a Sunday, because I only do my upset of the week if I were a bet man, stuff like that. Bryson's Bleak bet, again, wait for that later in the show. This would be my if I were a bet man game, or my upset of the week. Probably my if I were a bet man, because Buffalo, you're giving Buffalo minus 9.5 against a Lions team that's won 3 straight. They finally found some momentum in their running game. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're being able to do here. But with Josh Allen, and listen, folks, he is one of the great talents in this league at the quarterback position. He's fantastic, but I'm starting to wonder if he misses Brian Dable. Because last year, he had some bad games last year. Make no mistake about it. Look at the Jaguars game. Look at the Falcons game. He had some stinkers last year. But he makes up for it because he had 2 unbelievable performances against the Patriots. Obviously, who on earth could forget that performance at Arrowhead Stadium, toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes? And he's had some amazing games this year against good teams, by the way, the Titans and the Chiefs. But it's those little things. Down in the red zone, you're protecting a lead, and you throw a pick. It's as if he was throwing it to Alex Anzalone. You're down inside the 10. Why are you taking that risk? If nothing else, get the 3 points. You're guaranteed 3 points. Tyler Bass is not going to miss that kick. And it's a little Brett Favre-ish. Now, Josh Allen is a smarter quarterback than I think Brett Favre is in terms of reading the defense, in terms of decision-making. But sometimes Josh Allen will make those throws where you're like, what the heck are you doing? At this stage in time, Josh Allen, who to me is the second best quarterback in football behind Mahomes, folks, he's second in picks. He's thrown 11 interceptions this year. Now, he's second in touchdowns. He's 5 behind Mahomes, which Mahomes is, to me, running away with the MVP right now. And by the way, he's third in QBR. Still, despite that performance, he's third in QBR. But again, it's sort of what I was talking about with Dak Prescott that I appreciate with Josh Allen. What the great quarterbacks do in this league better than anybody is rebounding from bad or average games. When Detroit kicked that field goal, which thankfully Jim Nantz, like he did earlier in the game, did not jinx him, thankfully. But when Detroit kicked the field goal, how much time was left? 23 seconds. Did any of us think that game was going to overtime? It's kind of like what I said on Monday about the Chiefs-Chargers game when the Chargers scored with a little under 2 minutes left. I'm like, is there even a Charger fan out there? Much less the rest of us. But is there a Charger fan out there that's like, yeah, we're going to stop Mahomes? It's like, no, this is what Mahomes does. This is why he makes $45 million a year for stuff like this. And what does Mahomes do? Boop, 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 right down the field, touchdown to Travis Kelce to win the game. Conversely, same here with Josh Allen. First pass. And it's what makes Josh Allen great. Fits it perfectly right over the middle on a freaking rope to Stephon Diggs for a gain of 36 yards to get into field goal range. But then it goes back to frustrating Bills where, okay, they're in field goal range. Use a timeout. Got a little under 20 seconds left. You want to get closer. Hey, I'm all for getting closer because by that point, it'd be a 56-yarder. You want to make it easier on your kicker. But this is what's going to get Buffalo beat in the playoffs. Their only run game is Josh Allen. And you see them running quarterback power right twice to get them closer. And Josh Allen is a great runner of the football. He's big, he's physical, but you can't have your quarterback taking all these big hits. And if they can't develop a running game with Devin Singletary and company, they're going to get beat by Kansas City down the road. They very well might get beat by Tennessee down the road. Because what will the Titans do should they match up? They will, play ball control with Derrick Henry, milk the clock, put Ryan Tannehill in position to where he doesn't make big mistakes like he did in the playoff game last year against Cincinnati. By the way, the Titans play Cincinnati. That's a fascinating game for this weekend. Okay. And then Buffalo will be in a position to where they're losing the time of possession battle. This is how this is how they lost against Kansas City at times. In 2020, Kansas City developed a running game. Obviously the big plays to Tyreek and company down the field. This is what's going to get Buffalo beat. Not being able late in games, whether it's to bleed clock, whether it's to simply just get in field goal range or get closer, make the field goal easier for your kicker. How do they do that? They have to run Josh Allen. And he's taking these big hits out there. It reminds me a little bit of Cam Newton. Part of what got Cam was never as accurate as Josh Allen. That part of what got Cam in the end, he was just not an accurate thrower of the football. But part of what got him also, and we've seen it in the end, man, that guy took a lot of hits. And you say, well, he's 6'5", 250. Man, there's only so much hits a grown man could take. There's only so much hits anyone can take. And Josh Allen's not excluded from that. I get he's 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is. Big, strong frame. But you've got to build a running game. And Buffalo's offensive line, in some ways, has struggled in that regard. So being able to run the football, being able to, with Josh Allen, put yourselves in position to succeed, put yourself in positions to run the clock out, just simply get closer to field goal range. It's those little things that concern me with Buffalo down the road. But a good win for them over Detroit. Again, listen, had this game been on a Sunday, I swear to you guys, this would have been my if I were a Bettin Man game. Absolutely. Because Lions at home, they played well at home. They score a lot of points. They're on a 3-game winning streak. Although there were some questionable decisions by Dan Campbell. So I can't play the kneecap bite. I can't do it today. I'll do it when the Lions win another game. Can't do it today. Sorry. Love you, Dan Campbell, though. All right, we've got a very special guest coming on the show right now. Been looking forward to having this guy on for a while. He's a good friend of mine. I go so far as to call him like an older brother. Okay, so we just started this podcast a couple months ago. It's called the Khaotic Sports Podcast. It's one show a week. It's on the Grid Network, by the way. So he's a teammate of mine on the Grid. His name is Patrick Brown. Okay, he's the host of the Khaotic Sports Podcast, and basically what he does with his show, because as he would describe it to you, and he will describe it in just a second, there's a lot of chaos in the sports world, and what he does better than anybody is seeping through it and finding, I guess, some sort of conclusion through the chaos, if you will. So, without further ado, would you please welcome Patrick Brown of the Khaotic Sports Podcast. Patrick, how you doing, my guy? Welcome to Carving It Up for the first time.
Is my audio good on your end, Bryson?
Yes, sir. I got you loud and clear, bro.
I'm doing pretty good. Happy belated Thanksgiving as well.
Yes, sir. To you as well, and of course to all those watching and listening. Now, before we get any sports, I sort of gave a little bit of a very short, summarized version of what your show is about and what it sort of details. Talk to the audience about your show. Again, the Khaotic Sports Podcast, which is on the grid with my show as well as other shows that I
Hmm.
brought up in the past. Talk to the audience about the Khaotic Sports Podcast, what it's about.
My podcast is basically trying to find the bright spot in the midst of the chaos while adding a little bit of a pop culture flair to it, something different and unique that's not usually done on podcasts or any kind of television show. I've The inspiration behind my podcast is from my niece and nephew.
Hmm.
They're the biggest inspiration around it, and I've always wanted to dive into the bigger picture and being the voice of reason. So that's where most of the chaos comes from. Is trying to find a bright spot, being positive about it, and being a voice of reason without being biased.
I appreciate that. And listen, you keep it real in your show. You and listen, some if there's been any sports controversies, say like involving Antonio Brown or somebody, like you're straight up. You keep it real with everybody. And I really appreciate that about you. I would really like to hear your take to start on yesterday's Giants Cowboys game. Obviously, you are a Cowboys fan,
Hmm.
lifelong, I assume. So,
Oh
what
yeah.
was sort of your takeaway from the game? It was I described it earlier in the show as a very weird game where you got a Cowboys offense that puts up 40 against Minnesota and then only scores a touchdown, has a lot of miscues. And what scares me about Dallas down the road is 13 penalties. And that feels like it's going to rear its ugly head and come back to bite him down the road. But what was your takeaway on the Cowboys 28-20 victory over the New York Giants on Thursday?
It was looking like a colossal disappointment in the first half because I had a feeling going into this game that we were going to start slow as usual, penalties, and kind of overlook the Giants as the inferior opponent, knowing that they were down defensive linemen left and right. It was just missed opportunities in the first half to really impose our will, and that game shouldn't have been that close in the first half. It should have not been that close, knowing the fact that we had just dropped 40 points on Minnesota on Sunday, and the only muster up was it 7 in the first half
Mm-hmm.
before, yeah, it was 13-7 at the half. That crucial stop and on the Giants' last possession for the half, that was crucial.
Yeah.
But then making the adjustments, Kellen Moore got the memo to run the football. Run the football. I tweeted that out. I cannot stress enough. Run the football. Do not put Dak in second and third and longs in order for him to keep us in the game because we all know what happens if he has to pass, and he was throwing it into very, very tight windows. That one where he threw in the three Giants, I was like, that throw shouldn't have happened, in all honesty.
Right.
But credit to this defense for showing up in the second half as well. Zeke looked phenomenal.
He did.
He looked phenomenal, and I know everybody's been hard on him the last three or so seasons, but the things that he brings to this team, you can't deny. And especially in the pass blocking schemes, you can't
Yes.
ignore that. We all love Tony Pollard, but Tony Pollard can't do what Zeke does in the passing game. He can get free and get between the tackle and the guard, but if you ask him to go out there in a passing situation, try to block and a linebacker or defensive tackle, he's just going to get blown up in the backfield.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, listen, and I talked about Zeke. I've been one of those who has been critical of him, and I said a few weeks ago, I think it was after the Green Bay game, I said at this point, I don't know what more Tony Pollard needs to show you in terms of that. He's my guy in terms of giving him more carries than Zeke. But
mm-hmm.
when you talk about Zeke, being able, like you sort of mentioned about Pollard and Zeke showed this yesterday, being able to hit those holes quickly and with explosiveness. And I did bring this up about Zeke earlier in the show, and he's certainly, as you mentioned, better than Pollard in this regard. He's one of the best running backs in football when it comes to pass blocking. He doesn't care to take on a 300-pound defensive end
Mm-hmm.
or to take a linebacker coming 100 miles an hour up the middle in order to protect Dak Prescott or Cooper Rush or whoever the quarterback is. And I've always appreciated that about Zeke. Let's see. We've got a comment from our guy, Barry Grant Jr., All Even Podcast. He says, Patrick, finally a fellow Cowboys fan on
What's
this
up,
show.
Barry? What's up, Barry? Our great co-founder and teammate. What's good, Barry?
There you go. I got the hat right here. Got to rep the brand. But, I think it was fascinating, too, with the Giants. And I want to get your take on this because I think in some ways, and the Cowboys defense this season has been absolutely phenomenal. We know what Micah Parsons represents, what he brings to the table. Trayvon Diggs, to me, has improved about as much as any player in football in terms of being a pure cover corner. The interceptions aren't close to what they were last year, but that's almost a good thing because there's a reason they kept throwing his way last year because I called him the gambler. He's Kenny Rogers. He's going to be a little bit boomer bust.
Right.
Not the case this year. But the one glaring hole in the Cowboys defense is they can't stop the run. And that's what Green Bay took advantage of. And for whatever reason, Minnesota didn't with Dalvin Cook, and the Giants gave Saquon Barkley 11 carries. Explain that to me. Do you think that this is something that still could rear its ugly head down the road for the Cowboys? Because they still got to play Derrick Henry in Week 17. We know Washington can really run the football. So can the Eagles. Is this something that should be a major concern for the Cowboys moving forward?
Absolutely. I mean, this run defense, if just looking at the remaining schedule, Bryson, the game that is really going to be the tall tale of this Cowboys defense is the Tennessee game, the last second to row game to end the season. This is a very glaring hole. The pass defense, I'm semi-worried about, but it all starts up front. If you can't stop the running back, you're going to get cooked because then that opens up the passing game, and then you put more pressure on the back end to try to be in the right place at the right time to make a play. And you notice that they're throwing the ball in Anthony Brown's direction, and they're staying clear of Trayvon Diggs.
Right.
So for me, yes, the run defense is a glaring red flag for me. And if we don't get a clamp on this, over the next, 6 or 7 weeks, that's going to rear its ugly head along with the penalties. The penalties, penalties. I can't stress that enough. Undisciplined football is not going to beat the 49ers, Eagles, or the Vikings, neither the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're not going to beat those 4 teams if you're out there, positive yards getting a positive drive going, and then you got a false start, illegal formation, or hold. The same mental mistakes is going to beat this team whenever we get to the playoffs. And you cannot. It's all mental. 65% of football is mental. And if you're not a disciplined team, you're going to keep making those mistakes. And I did see where Mike McCarthy said, we're going to clean that up. And you said that at the end of the postseason game last year, there after that first round exit. I haven't seen much of an adjustment. I really haven't. Because it's all mental. If you keep making these mental mistakes, it's going to cause us to, be a one and done. But I give Dan Quinn the benefit of the doubt that they would get this run defense together. It's just a matter of going about it and being about it versus talking about it.
So the penalties are a bigger concern to you because you trust Dan Quinn to shore up that aspect of the defense.
If they can shore that up, Bryson, that will put us in a good spot. But they cannot just keep overblowing assignments when it matters. Because one thing we do know, Mike is going to show up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just the other guys that concern me up front. We know DeMarcus Lawrence is not a sack artist, but he's good against the run.
He is.
It's just the middle of that defensive line that bothers me because that is the tall tale of this run defense is the middle between the defensive tackles with Gallimore, and now they added Jonathan Hankins, and they got what's his name? Odigizua. Yeah, he's in the middle of that defensive line, and that's the glaring hole because once they get past those guys, you put the pressure on the linebackers or corner or safety to come up and try to tackle, and it's a mismatch made in hell right now.
Absolutely. The last question before we move on, because I'd like to get your thoughts on the Vikings-Patriots game. You, of all people, know how much I love Dak Prescott. I was a fan of this guy even back to his days at Mississippi State, even though, weirdly enough, I'm a Tennessee fan. I don't know how that worked. But with Dak yesterday, I noticed that there seemed to be a lot of focus on his first half play, which even I, as the most ardent Dak supporter, said he did not play well in the first half. The 2 interceptions, it's a debate as to whether the second one was his fault. It was kind of a miscommunication between him and CD. The first one was absolutely his fault when he was trying to hit Gallup and what he, for some weird reason, thought was a free play. But then I talk about the second half, 80% completion, 2 touchdowns, pushing the ball down the field. I felt like you brought up the penalties, which there were I rewatched the game today, a crap ton of penalties in that first drive to start the second half. And it was often Dak getting them out on that third down to CeeDee Lamb, and then that touchdown over the top to Schultz. What was sort of your take on Dak's play yesterday, and what's sort of your overall opinion of him in terms of whether or not he can take the Cowboys to the promised land?
He's got to come out. It all starts with getting going early.
Okay.
You have to come out and move the ball early. Run the football is the key point indicator, and in order for Dak to be successful. That way you get him in the play action, and you can put him in second and third and short versus the penalties of the holding, illegal formation, offensive interference, where the case may be. But to me, that it starts with the opening possession of the game, Bryson. He has to really don't try to get the yardage within the first play. Take
Sure.
what the defense gives you. If you've got to dump it off on a short pass, then so be it. Don't go out there on the first play from the line of scrimmage and try to air it out 25, 30 yards to CD or Gallup. You can't do that. And with the way that we've been playing with our tight ends, I think they're going to be the better security blanket moving forward.
Sure.
But I would love to see Kellen Moore get Kevontae Turpin involved in this offense. He's more than just, the kickoff and punt returner. I mean, Tony Pollard, for example, Sunday, but Tony Pollard, he was effective in the run, and then the pass out to the outside where he took it to the house. That's where Tony Pollard could be used in the passing game. It's not always going to be the run, but going in to start the game, you get Pollard going, you get Zeke going, and then you can get Dak going. You can feature CD and Gallup in the tight ends, but if you're coming out and the defense already knows, according to the formation, that they're going to go with the pass on the first down, it's like, oh, all you got to do is send 2 guys at him, and then our back end's going to, be ready to pick it off. But I think it just comes down to execution on Dak's part. Eliminate these slow starts, because if you eliminate these slow starts, this team is untouchable. But as I just said, if Dak comes out there and pulls at his will early, you strike fear in the opposition. But if they're out there just playing cat and mouse, then you leave little to the imagination, because it's just an accident waiting to happen with Dak, whether it's an interception or it's a costly fumble at the line of scrimmage like it was yesterday. But it's just luckily that he picked it back up and delivered it to, was it Hendershot with Ferguson with the hurdle. So that was a play that could have ended really bad, but ended up being really good.
Yeah, and I think the thing too is Kellen Moore has had to adjust the offense ever since Dak has come back. Because obviously he's the better talent, better quarterback than Rush is, and it's about having a good sense of balance. That's what really hurt the Cowboys big time against Green Bay. Dak was okay, but when you got a running game that's averaging 5 yards a carry, Green Bay can't stop the run. It's about being able to bleed the clock. And again, of course, I will say in fairness, Kellen Moore, Mike McCarthy, they were running the ball in overtime, but penalties killed them. Jalen Tolbert, but I think with Dak, it's. I read the numbers off earlier in the show. They were in the 20s in terms of scoring and in terms of third down conversions and things of that nature with Cooper Rush. With Dak, they're in the top 3 in almost every statistical category. It's about striking that balance. It's about, again, they obviously opening the playbook more. And now that this defense has kind of realized, like, hey, just because our starting quarterback's back doesn't mean we need to let our foot off the gas pedal. And you've seen sort of that shift ever since the Green Bay game is going to be key moving forward. Now, the nightcap, which ended up being a fantastic football game, the New England Patriots and the Minnesota Vikings. I will say this, a guy that I've been heavily critical of, Kirk Cousins, aside from the one interception he threw in the second quarter, which, by the way, was a really bad pick. After that, I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Getting the ball to Justin Jefferson out in space, leading them down the field. What was sort of your takeaway on the Vikings, and where do you see them amongst the contenders in the NFC with an 9-2 record?
One and done.
Okay.
Because Mac Jones threw for nearly 400 yards against that defense.
Yeah.
Their pass defense is going to rear its ugly head, and Kirk Cousins is going to fold. If you really look at Mac Jones outplayed Kirk Cousins. If you look at the stats, stat wise, Kirk Cousins got outplayed by Mac Jones. but where New England lost the game at, was it a kickoff return for a touchdown, if I'm not
Special
mistaken?
teams. Yep.
Special teams. This New England special teams gave up 14 points.
It
If
did.
they had not run into the kicker,
Yep.
they get off the field. They get off the field because they were going to have the ball back in pretty good field position. But you run into the kicker, that kept Minnesota's drive alive, and they cashed in on it. But the big concern for me, just watching replay of that game, that defense is not going to make it, and you're going to put Kirk Cousins in bad spots to try to go toe to toe with, say, they get the Giants in the first round, or
You would favor the Giants?
If push comes to shove, I mean, it's going to come down. That last wildcard spot in the NFC is going to come down between the Commanders, Giants, and I'm going to throw a wild card, a team out there that's starting to. I'm going to say the Falcons or the Seahawks.
Sure.
That last wild card spot is going to be up for grabs. If Minnesota is the number 2 seed, I would not want to play neither of those hot teams coming in. But the Minnesota Vikings, we played them this past Sunday, and they did not look like an 8-1 team.
No,
they didn't. Because we all know going into that game, when Dallas's backs are against the walls when they play their best football. And Minnesota was feeling themselves, coming off the big win over Buffalo and whatnot. And we know what happened. Minnesota in the first 3 minutes of the game, less than 2 minutes into the game, Micah strip sacks Kirk Cousins, and that's all she wrote. But the Vikings, I think their pass defense is ranked 31st.
It is.
It's like
that's
going to
beat them down the road against these quarterbacks in the NFC, whether it be Brady, Dak. Heck, I'd even go as far as to say Jimmy Garoppolo, Geno Smith, the way he's playing. But you bring up a good point there. And again, they can get to the quarterback. Obviously, they got Zadarius Smith, but when you talk about some of they've got some very talented players in the secondary. Harrison Smith, Patrick Peterson, who's still, individually, I think playing pretty well this season at his advanced age and stage of his career. But right. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, Mac Jones had probably the best game of his career yesterday on a short week. You can say maybe some that's Belichick's game planning, being ready to go in an environment like Minnesota. But against the Jets, obviously a great defense, in my opinion, a Super Bowl caliber defense. Mac Jones is awful, okay? Mac Jones has been awful most of the season. And, like you talked about, he outplayed Kirk Cousins. He did throw for more yards and have a slightly better passer rating. Kirk beat him pretty handily in the QBR battle, 84-56. But when you're talking about, New England with they're already thin at wide receiver, and then Jacoby Myers goes down. So now it's even worse. And they did lean on Ramondre Stevenson to a certain degree, but that is a concern for Minnesota moving forward. Let me check their schedule. They got the Jets. That could be an issue. Then they finish with Detroit, Indianapolis, Giants, Packers, Bears. Mm-hmm. So I go as far as to say all of those games they'll be favored in. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about, again, some of the quarterbacks in here, listen, that is still Aaron Rodgers. Listen, he's got the thumb injury. It's still Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
And again, Justin Fields, will he be available for Week 18? We'll see. But he's got the ability to break a big play on you at any time in the game. But I just think that's the thing for Minnesota. I said before the season that they would win the NFC North, which that at this point that's a foregone conclusion. And I thought that they would win a playoff game depending on the matchup. Should they draw the Giants, it'll be a matter about stopping Saquon Barkley. You do that, I think you win the game. Because as much as you and I don't trust Kirk Cousins, I trust him a heck of a lot more than I trust Daniel Jones. And in terms of a decision maker, Danny Dimes, as some still call him, it has not been that dude. But I just think it's a fascinating matchup with Minnesota going down the stretch of the season. Bills Lions. That was an interesting game. That was that was another one where, again, Buffalo's favored -9.5. I'm like, man, I don't know about that.
That was a little high.
What's that?
That was a little high.
Absolutely. The way that Buffalo's been struggling a little bit offensively, Josh Allen in particular, Detroit had won 3 straight games. They found a running game. Jared Goff, St. Brown seemed to have a good connection. And that baby went all the way down to the wire. What was sort of your takeaway on that game in terms of the fourth quarter, but certainly the more relevant team, the Buffalo Bills, and their chances in the AFC moving forward?
Bryson, I'm going to be honest with you. Since that Kansas City Chiefs game that Buffalo won, they have not impressed me at all.
Yeah.
Because I've talked about this on my show, that they're too heavily reliant on Josh Allen
Mhm.
And we've seen, just seem like every game when they get into the red zone, he throws an interception. Again, why aren't they running the football? That is a concern for me because if Josh Allen is going to lead this team to Arizona to the Super Bowl, he's going to have to eliminate the red zone turnovers. That right there is the same mistake he keeps making over and over. And it's not being fixed. You've got the three-headed monster in your backfield. Why aren't you utilizing it? I mean, I understand that Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers of football,
Yeah.
but when you get into the red zone, you got to run the football, Bryson.
And it's not to cut you off. It's not necessarily the red zone that concerns me about their inability to run the football. It's you got a 7-point lead, say late in some of these games, like against
Right,
a Cleveland or teams like that. And the fact that their only way to bleed out the clock is with their quarterback taking big hit after big hit. And again, it's yesterday against Detroit, like I talked about. It's you're in field goal range, you're trying to get closer. I'm all for that. But the only way for you to
right.
get any sort of yardage is for your quarterback to take some serious, serious punishment. Not to mention they're obviously trying to strip the football, give themselves a chance to get the ball back. I'm with you. This Bills offensive line to me has underachieved this year. I can't necessarily put on Devin Singletary because they're not really committing to the run as a whole.
Right. And I was watching the replay and all that. Their defense was playing soft. I mean, it's like they was like if you really look at that, if you look at the stats for both teams, third down efficiency was back and forth.
Yeah.
That's what kept Detroit in that game was converting third downs. I was like, are y'all even going to apply pressure, or y'all just going to let Jared Goff stand back here and just dump it off to Armand St. Brown or Swift or Williams? I mean, I'm sitting there watching the highlights. I'm thinking, what are y'all doing? This
Yeah.
defense is not the same defense we saw the first part of the season when they was just getting after the quarterback. But the biggest blow, Von Miller's knee injury. So we don't know what the extent of that is right now. So that can be a concern as well as his knee. From what I had read earlier, it sounds like some structural damage, but he didn't tear his ACL. So it sounds like it can be manageable, but that too, their defense and Josh Allen's turnovers is like that's good. They're not going to be able to beat Kansas City like that if they cross paths in the AFC Championship game. They're not going to be able to do that.
And yeah, I did read Ian Rappaport reported that they're going to reevaluate Von Miller in 7 to 10 days. So it looks like they don't believe that this is going to be a season-ending injury, which is great. They I think in order to win a Super Bowl, which is obviously their ultimate goal, they have to have Von Miller healthy because we know the presence that he brings, being able to get to the quarterback. But I'm with you. They play this seem like a lot of soft zone. That's how Anzalone got his interception down the red zone. And obviously some of it was bad decision making by Allen, but some of it too in defense of the Bills. This was Tre'Davious White's first game coming back from injury. He hadn't played in, I think, a year. So getting him reacclimated to just to playing football out there is going to be key. Bills down the stretch of the season. They got 6 games left. They got Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, Bears, Bengals, Patriots. So definitely some dicey ones in there. Cincinnati's going to be tough. We know how good Miami is. And listen, it is still Bill Belichick, and I wouldn't be shocked if they split those games. And not to mention, hey, the Jets are no pushover either, without a question.
Right.
But it's going to be interesting. We have a couple comments from my man Grady Edwards. He says, people have crowned Buffalo too early. Sure, it's KC, them, and everyone else in the AFC. Buffalo isn't that much better than KC, and I'm taking KC to win the AFC this season, maybe the Super Bowl. Buffalo's overall roster is not much better than Kansas City. I can't say I disagree, because when you look at how, and it's not just the talent of the players, because it goes deeper than that. How Andy Reid uses, and I know we're sort of like, getting into a Chiefs topic at this point, but it's worth mentioning.
Right.
When you recognize and realize how he uses some of these pieces, we know talented guys like Kelsey, but that Pacheco, the running back that they've used, has been really good for him.
Right.
Juju Smith-Schuster has had like a I don't know what the word is, just a revamp of his career since his days in Pittsburgh with Big Ben.
Right.
Kadarius Toney, now he's going to be out this week. I forgot who they play. I think they play the is it the Saints? No, Kansas. No, the Rams. They play the Rams. They play the Rams this week. But he's gonna be out. But the way they've used him in the running and the passing game, unlike the Giants could, it's like the Kansas City has almost become like the island of misfit toys. Basically, if you're an underused player, go to Kansas City. Andy Reid's going to find you a way to get the football and make big plays. And that's, to me, what the big difference is Mahomes, to me, and I said this with all due respect to the GOAT Tom Brady, there's no quarterback trailing by double digits I'd rather have than Patrick Mahomes. He makes it routine at this point. Trail by 10, trail by 17, even at one point against the Las Vegas Raiders. And then 30 minutes later, you look up, you're like, yep, Kansas City's up by 4 with 5 minutes to go in the game.
Right.
Who's your favorite right now in the AFC? Because I got Kansas City number 1, and I'm not going to lie to you, bro. I got Baltimore number 2. I trust Baltimore at this stage more than I trust Buffalo.
Kansas City 1, Tennessee 2.
I forgot about Tennessee.
Baltimore 3, and I put Buffalo at 4.
Wow, okay.
Because Buffalo, like I said, their last 3 or 4 games, I have not been impressed with. The first part of the season, they were lighting everybody up. The best game of the season for them was at Kansas City. And since then, it's just been 1 possession game, 2 possession, and then they're in a cage match trying to get out of there by the skin of their teeth.
Right.
But I think right now I say Kansas City 1, Tennessee 2, Baltimore 3, Buffalo 4. I'm going to say Cincinnati 5, and then 6.
Jets.
I got the Jets in there, and then that 7 seed. Can the Chargers get some consistency going to keep themselves in this race? That's the thing with the Chargers that kind of drives me up the wall. The same stuff that they fired Anthony Lynn for. Brandon Staley is situational football, man. The same stuff they fired Anthony Lynn over. Brandon Staley doesn't know what the heck he's doing in situational football when it's time to make decisions, and he looks like he's a fat cat dragging himself across the floor that can't hardly move.
Yeah, and it looks like he's been overwhelmed late in these situations. Anthony Lynn, certainly there were some questionable calls made by Anthony Lynn over the years in terms of, as you mentioned, in the fourth quarter and in some cases overtime. But it's just this weird sort of, it's been one of the weirdest things to watch in the NFL this season, where Anthony Lynn has gone from last year, it's like he's playing Madden, where he's going for it at every single fourth down, to now he had a play against Kansas City, against Patrick Mahomes. You got a 4th and inches at midfield and you punt it. Like you almost wonder if the narrative got to him in some way, shape, or form. And listen, but I am reading over the last few weeks that's Sean Payton's number 1 preferred destination. And listen, why wouldn't it be? You got Justin Herbert, you got that roster. Can you imagine what Sean Payton could do with that? I mean, he look at what he did to Drew Brees' career, and we thought that guy was done.
Exactly. And I think that's going to be his destination is the Chargers, because
I agree.
That roster ready. You make a few adjustments here and there. The Chargers are going to probably top the Chiefs, in all honesty.
I wouldn't go there quite yet.
As long you need a coach that can go toe to toe with Andy Reid in that division. You need that coach. Sean Payton is an offensive guru. Just like you said, look at what he did with Drew Brees. And like I said, we all thought Drew Brees was done. He goes to New Orleans and they turn that thing around in like 3 years and they're in the Super Bowl.
Right.
If the Chargers were to hire Sean Payton, sign me up. Sign me up, because I think that we will have a Chiefs-Chargers AFC Championship game, if truth be told, in the next couple of years.
Sign me up if that's the case. Mahomes versus Herbert for the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. Absolutely. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this. The Zach Wilson benching. I was a guy who was not a big Zach Wilson fan coming out of the draft. I said, anytime you have these draft where it's 4 or 5 first-round talents at the quarterback position, usually 2 of them, succeed at a high level. Think about 2018, where you had Allen and Lamar, have exploded in the NFL. You usually have one where it's like kind of a coin flip. You got to wait a little bit longer on him than most, and then you have 2 busts.
Right.
My 2 busts coming out of that draft were Mac and Zach Wilson. Zach for a completely different reason than Mac. Really the opposite. Really, certainly more talented than Mac Jones. Better arm. I think better playmaker outside of the pocket. But decision making is not only on but off the field. You talk about the press conference. To me, it just goes to show you how fine a line it is between great quarterbacks and even franchise quarterbacks and guys that bounce from team to team. It's
Mhm.
simply if Zach Wilson takes accountability. If they ask him, hey, Zach, do you take any accountability or any blame for the offensive performance? If he says yes and then goes on to say we got to execute better, just the cliche, just give a cliche answer. He's starting Sunday against the Chicago Bears, in my opinion. What's sort of your
Mhm.
thoughts on the whole situation?
All right, I'm gonna use a little bit of an analogy here. You remember when you were a kid and your parents said, "Don't let me count to three," because you knew what was coming. That's what the New York Jets did to uh, Zach Wilson.
Okay.
But it wasn't until his own dad said, "You gotta apologize." When he didn't take accountability for his play on the field, damage was already done. We knew what was coming. It was just a matter if they were going to do it. Now that they've done it, they pretty much gave him a checklist of things he has to do before he can maybe, just maybe, get back on the field. But he has to go through all that in order to get back on the field. Now, I will say this. If Mike White gets on a roll, Zach Wilson's not getting that job back. They've got 7 games left on their schedule. I went through it. If they can go 4-3, that would put them at 10-7 and possibly be a 5 or 6 seed in the AFC playoffs.
Right.
With their style of defense, all they need is consistent quarterback play. They've got Sauce Gardner, going to probably be the defensive rookie of the year,
He's
unanimous defensive
phenomenal.
rookie of the year. Jermaine Johnson, Robert Saleh has done everything to get this team prepared every week. And that defense, they feast off their defensive side of the ball with their energy. But if you ain't got that quarterback play, you're not going anywhere. So I think that this was the right move for the Jets to say, we're going to sit you down for put you in a little timeout, and you're going to get a checklist of things you need to do before you can maybe get back on the field. But if Mike White can keep this thing afloat, Zach Wilson's not getting the job back.
This almost feels like Heineke, Wentz, in Washington, where it's, a lot of
Exactly.
defensive coaches are very different from offensive coaches in that they have much shorter leashes for their quarterbacks. I mean, that's what you saw with Ron Rivera with the Commanders, and now with Robert Saleh. I almost feel like after that press conference, and again, you had wide receivers who nobody looks to wide receiver to be the leader of the football team, but you had guys like Elijah Moore, I think it was, who is talking about how many points we score, or how many yards we have, and they said like 100 and whatever yards. He said, man, that's not good enough. We got to be better. When you got the wide receiver taking the blame and the quarterback won't, Zach Wilson lost the locker room, and I think Robert Saleh would have lost the locker room had he not benched him. And like you mentioned, whenever you have these situations where a quarterback is benched or the starting quarterback is hurt, like in the case of Washington with Kirk Cousins, it is always an indictment on the starter when the backup wins a couple games and it's like, oh gosh, we probably should go to Mike White. Let's say Mike White plays well the next 2. We should go to him. It's like, with a few years ago when Teddy Bridgewater stepped in for Drew Brees.
Oh,
Teddy
yeah.
Bridgewater played well. They won all 5 games. There was never a doubt in the building. When Drew comes back, he's going to be our guy. Same thing
Right.
this season with the Cowboys and Dak. With the Jets, Zach Wilson hasn't done enough this season to where you're like, oh, he's absolutely the starter when he comes back, when he's ready to take accountability. And it's sort of a double-edged sword. You can't be a bad leader and not perform on the field. It's kind of like what Russell Wilson done this season. Of course, Grady has just got to drive it in even further. He says, Bryson, you're not sticking with Denver to win the Super Bowl. No, Grady, I jumped off that train about a month and a half ago. Okay? I will never forgive myself for that. Never. Let's ride, baby.
That's looking real good. 12
Woo.
weeks into the regular season, that the Denver Broncos are not even nowhere near where we expected them to be.
Hey, and guess who I picked them to face in the Super Bowl? The
Rams.
Rams.
They're not going to.
2 3-win teams at Thanksgiving. Dang it. I'll never forgive myself for that. I'll never. Grady says, obviously, I'm a Patriots fan, so I'm biased, but I think Mac is a fine quarterback. I don't think it's fair to call the man a bust. He is okay. Dude is a starting quarterback, nothing more, nothing less. And he also says the Pats will finish with a better record than the Jets. Jets are a clown killer quarterback. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, they both, let's see, let's say the Jets lose, that would knock them to the same record, and the Patriots would have the tiebreaker because, they swept the Jets this season. Again, I'm not saying Mac is necessarily a bust yet, but when you talk about how he finished last season and up until Minnesota, he was awful this year. And some of that, listen, I'll give Max some of the benefit of the doubt. Some of that is the fact that he has a defensive coordinator as his offensive coordinator. He's got Matt Patricia. Some of it's the thin wide receiving core. It's a lot of factors, but again, I'm not moving off my position until proven otherwise, of course, that Mac Jones is not the dude for the Patriots for the
Well,
long haul. Last
for
question for you. What's that?
I said Mac Jones. Look at what Mac Jones had at Alabama compared to what he's got in New England. That tells you everything you need to know.
Listen,
He
I'm not
had
talking about the team. His receiving core was better in Alabama than it is in
exactly.
New England.
I mean, you had Devontae Smith and Jalen
Mechie.
Waddle, Mechie. I mean, it was wide receiver heaven.
Yeah.
That's a pro style offense. Alabama. You have what does Alabama do best? What does Nick Saban do best? He recruits toys to go with his quarterback to make his
Yeah.
quarterback look good. But that's on New England for not surrounding Mac Jones with talent.
No,
That's on
absolutely.
them because if you can't you can draft a quarterback, but you ain't getting no talent around him.
No,
I mean,
you're not. And that's and it's something that Belichick has kind of always struggled with, even back to his days with Brady. Now, last question before I let you go. Who is, if you had two today is November the 25th of 2022, you, Patrick Brown, who would you take out of the AFC, out of the NFC, who will meet on February 12th in Glendale, Arizona at State Farm Stadium for Super Bowl 50, is this 58, I guess, Super Bowl 58? Who meets in the Super Bowl?
49ers Chiefs.
Here we go. Rematch of Super Bowl 54. I love it.
Rematch because number one, I think the 49ers are better head to shoulders out of any team in the NFC.
I agree.
The Chiefs, we know what they're about. I would take, if they met in Arizona for the Super Bowl, I would take the 49ers.
Okay.
Only because I think they would have that little bit of a revenge factor in them
Yeah.
because they let that one get away. I'm saying 49ers and Chiefs in Arizona for the Super Bowl, and the 49ers will win.
Okay. Well, what do you look like? Okay, then let me ask you this before we get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do for Jimmy Garoppolo? Do they keep him? Is it a 1-year deal? Is it a 3-year? Because they're not going to give him like 5 or 6 or something. What does that do? Because here's the thing for Jimmy Garoppolo. Those two teams in New York could sure use him. They would absolutely take Daniel Jones or Jimmy G over Daniel Jones with the Giants, and 100% take him over Zach Wilson with the Jets. What would that mean for Jimmy Garoppolo?
There's going to be teams out there that's going to acquire for his services. You know, you look
But
at
I'm saying, do you think the Niners would keep him?
I think they would. I mean, they stuck with him this time around because what have we seen out of Trey Lance so
Right.
far? We haven't. And how good is he? How's his recovery going to be with that ankle?
Sure.
That's kind of playing a role right now because if you trade him or he goes elsewhere and Trey Lance gets hurt again, then they're back in the same predicament.
That's true.
If Jimmy G can put together a Super Bowl run, I believe they keep him for another year as an insurance policy to Trey Lance because they know what they got with Jimmy G.
Right.
I still don't believe that they know what they got in Trey Lance if you haven't seen much of Trey. That's not saying
That's
he
true.
can't play, but what would happen? You have to think logical. And I think John Lynch and that front office is going to evaluate Jimmy at the end of the season. And if it ends with a Super Bowl win, more power to him. He'll be on borrowed time for at least another year. But I would not be surprised if a team like the Giants or the Jets, acquire his services.
I agree with you. Patrick Brown, he's the host of the Khaotic Sports Podcast. Tell everybody where to get your show and where to listen.
The Chaotic Sports Podcast is available on the Grid Sports Podcast Network on all podcasting platforms. My show usually is one day. I usually record on between Saturday and Sunday, and it's uploaded by our co-founder Barry sometime during the day on Sunday. And before I get out of here, since I'm on the live stream with you all, I have on my DAC hoodie. It says "Ask for Help." I know there's a lot of mental illnesses that are going on in our country. And I want to say this, if you are feeling anxious, depressed, or suicidal, please seek help. Do not let society box you in and tell you that you don't need therapy. As a recovering mental health patient myself, please, if anybody go to therapy. It's okay to not be okay. And if
Amen.
anybody didn't tell you they love you today, I love you. I may not know you from Adam, but my heart goes out to those who are struggling with this as well as myself. And let's just try to keep the dialogue going and end the stigma of mental health.
I second every single word that you just uttered. And that's one of the reasons I am a Dak fan, is because of his openness about mental health and like you said, asking for help. And I think he writes it on his tape on his left wrist every game. So yeah. God bless you, brother, for saying that. I appreciate you coming on the show. Got to have you
Anytime,
back
Bryson.
on again sometime soon. Everybody there, go check out the Khaotic Sports Podcast on the grid, right where you can find my show. Check out Patrick's show. Patrick, appreciate you having on the show, man. Love you, man.
Love you too, bro. Take it easy. I'm going to watch the rest of your show, and I'm a big supporter. So anytime you need me to come on, just let me know. I got you, bro. I love doing this. I was a little anxious about coming on, but I thought, you know what? Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Hey, listen, that's what we're here for. That's what I love doing this show. Patrick Brown, Khaotic Sports Podcast. See you, brother.
All right, see you, buddy.
Patrick Brown of the Khaotic Sports Podcast. Always appreciate having him on the show. Again, first time. I've done some IG lives with him in the past. Again, very, very talented dude. Knows his stuff, as you guys can see there. And please go check out his show. It's very, very, very good. But he brings up a lot of good points. And, I wasn't necessarily going to hit on Minnesota's defense as much as I was Kirk Cousins. Talk about the Vikings game. But, man, that defense is bad. The pass defense, I should say, is bad. They've been able to stop the run at a decent level, but and I know my guy Grady is defending Mac Jones, which I totally respect. Look, he's a Patriots fan. I get that, but Mac Jones looked like Tom Brady yesterday. If we're being honest, he played excellent. I can't say anything bad about Mac Jones today. But Grady says Jimmy G is what the doctor ordered at QB for the Jets. Yep, mistake free, plays within the offense. Now, if you got to rely on him to win you games, that's where you start getting a little bit of trouble. But next year, you get Breece Hall back. Hopefully, if you're Joe Douglas, who's done just a great job as a general manager, you continue to hit home runs in the draft next year. Just saying. And Grady says, Tom Brady is the quarterback my Patriots need. I want him back. There's been a lot of Tom Brady Patriots rumors this season. It's been a little under the radar, but it's been a story because of the fact that Tom clearly doesn't want to be in Tampa. I think there's a reason that him and Sean Payton were literally this close to going to Miami. And listen, I know the Patriots trying to develop Mac Jones. And, at that point, it'd be about, does Tom want to go back to an environment where it's obviously a lot less loosey-goosey than Tampa Bay is, but also in the same breath, does he want to have to deal with Belichick? Because there's a respect between those two guys. I don't think Tom and Bill dislike each other. I don't. But I do think there was a bit of a power struggle for not all 2 decades, but once Tom elevated into, okay, that guy's probably the best quarterback in the league. He's winning MVPs. Then it became kind of like, okay, and that's when the debate started. Who deserves more credit? Is it Brady or is it Belichick? And obviously, heck, it took 1 year for us to figure out the answer to that question. Grady says, we need to remind Buffalo who owns the AFC East one more time. Again, in the Tom Brady era, and this is just crazy, but in the Tom Brady era, only twice since he took over at starting quarterback, only twice did they not win the AFC East. 2002, they didn't make it. And 2008, which Tom tore his ACL in 2008. So you if you don't want to count that year, be my guest, because Tom played one game against the Kansas City Chiefs that year. And Grady says, and take on the world one more time. That would be, can you imagine the story that would be? Man, Brady returns to New England, wins championship number 8, and then like him and Belichick retire. That would be legendary. That would be awesome. That's literally like the Bulls getting Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson back in like 2000. Like that's what it would be. That would be so cool. And I wouldn't bet against him. I know better than that. That would be so cool. All right. Week 12 in the NFL. All right. I think it's the first time since week 3, if I'm not mistaken, that all 32 teams play this weekend. Obviously, we had the 3 games yesterday, so 6 teams are done for week 12. We've got, 12 games? Yeah, 12 games for Sunday, ready to go. So here we go. Let's get the background music playing. We got it? All right, there we go. The background music. Here we go. Starting with a very, very interesting matchup. We just talked about Tom Brady. It's fitting. because he is going to Cleveland. Buccaneers, Browns in Cleveland. Tampa Bay is a 3.5-point favorite in Cleveland, Ohio. This is interesting. Leonard Fournette is reportedly doubtful to play. But what I'm looking at with this is Cleveland had success against Buffalo last week. As you guys know, that was actually my upset of the week last week with the Bills and the Browns. But you've got Cleveland at home. They run the ball well with Nick Chubb. Expect the Browns to get out to a little bit of a fast start in this game, especially with Tampa Bay coming off of a bye. However, I think ever since, and I truly believe this from the bottom of my heart, I think ever since this happens with a lot of players, we just know it to be true with Tom, because obviously his family situation was very, very public. I think ever since the door closed on that, Bruce Arians even alluded to it. Bruce Arians, who's now in the Buccaneers front office, he said, "I'm now seeing Tom smile at practice." So the burden of what everybody knows what a divorce can do to a person and to a family, that's not, I wouldn't say it's gone. I don't know where Tom is at mentally with that, but it's certainly, it's not, he's not in his, at least visibly not in as bad of a place now as he was then. So Tom's playing loose. They seem to actually find a decent formula with running the football against Seattle, and not necessarily with Leonard Fournette. Being able to get the ball to the playmakers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Julio Jones scored a long touchdown against Seattle a couple weeks back. So expect this to be kind of a close game throughout, but I think Tampa Bay pulls away in the end. I'm going to take the Buccaneers to win this game by a final score of 27-20 over the Cleveland Browns to get to 6-5, get a winning record for the first time since week 5, if I'm not mistaken. Buccaneers win this game in the Browns' final game before they get Deshaun Watson back next week, and certainly we will have a lot of reaction to that next week. Moving on to a playoff rematch. A playoff rematch, which, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it is. You got the Cincinnati Bengals and you got the Tennessee Titans in this week's version of
Bettin Man.
If I were a betting man, I'm looking at Bengals and I'm looking at the Titans. And in this game, Cincinnati is favored -2.5. Like it? I love it. I'm looking at the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Mixon is gone. He got hurt last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Samaje Perine played well, but we know what Joe Mixon represents. It looks like Jamar Chase is still gone. You're telling me if you're the Tennessee Titans, you've got Derrick Henry, you've got Ryan Tannehill, who played great against the Green Bay Packers. And although a lot of quarterbacks have done that, but Ryan Tannehill especially played very well. He seems to have built a good rapport with his wideouts in Tennessee. And you give Mike Vrabel 10 days to prepare against Joe Burrow? Oh, I'm jumping on this all day. If I were a betting man, give me the Tennessee Titans +2.5, and not just +2.5, to win the game outright over Cincinnati, 27-24. There's also the revenge factor of this, I think, that comes into play. Cincinnati beat Tennessee on a walk-off field goal. Tannehill threw the 3 interceptions. Derrick Henry, he'd come back from injury in that game. He didn't play that well. Mike Vrabel's had better days as a head coach. And so I think just the dynamic of the revenge factor, plus the fact that Tennessee has only lost 1 game since week 2, and that was with Malik Willis against Kansas City, and that game went to overtime. I think, and Patrick really did a good job of detailing this, we are underrating Tennessee right now. What Mike Vrabel represents as a head coach, what Derrick Henry can still do behind that offensive line in Tennessee, albeit beat up. Ryan Tannehill doesn't make mistakes. I'm going to take the Titans. If I were a bet man, take Tennessee and the 2.5 points to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Moving on to the Houston Texans taking on the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins, big favorites in this one. Not a shock to anybody. -14. And crazily enough, that's not the biggest line of this weekend. I'll get to that later on. Listen, Houston's playing bad football. And you guys know I liked Davis Mills out of a draft. He just got benched for Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen, who's a career backup. Obviously, we all remember a few years ago with Carolina, he had that little mini run where it was kind of Christian McCaffrey carrying Kyle Allen, but he made some good throws here and there. They won 4 straight games, but eventually defensive coordinators quite quickly picked up on what Kyle Allen was doing. Because why? Because he's Kyle Allen. He's not Tom Brady. So you got Kyle Allen starting for the Texans against the Dolphins, who are just playing outstanding football. I have been one who's been critical in the past of Tua Tagovailoa. I still don't know what I'm going to expect from him once playoff season comes, but I can't hate. He's playing good football right now. He's been accurate. He's gotten the ball into his playmakers' hands, and they made it happen. Tyreek Hill especially, who's having a remarkable season. this year with the Miami Dolphins. They're running the football well. They got Jeff Wilson for the 49ers, which I said was the most underrated deal at the deadline. He's done a great job. That Dolphins offensive line. What a jump from last year to this year. It's a mismatch. It is quite simply a mismatch. I don't see in any way, shape, or form how the Dolphins lose this game. I genuinely cannot see a scenario in which Miami loses unless Tua just plays the worst game of his career. Give me the Dolphins beat the Texans and cover the 14-point spread, 32-14, and keep the Texans at only a single win on the season. Hey, at least they don't have to worry about being the Detroit Lions of 2008 or the Cleveland Browns of 2017. No winless season for Houston, but looking at their schedule, that might be the only win they get. Moving on, actually, let's see. We got a comment here. Oh, Grady. Vanderbilt or Tennessee, how you feeling? Vols by 50. No, I'm just kidding. We're not winning by 50 points. Vols by 30, okay? We're going to come out pissed off after how your Gamecocks, Grady, embarrassed us and ended our college football playoff hopes and dreams. It's Vanderbilt, though. We'll come out and take care of business. Back to the NFL, though. Listen, I got to support my Vols. You got a matchup that we didn't think would be that interesting coming in. Now we're looking at it like, man, we got to watch this game. The Chicago Bears taking on the New York Jets. Now, for the Bears, the big story is Justin Fields questionable with a shoulder injury to play this game in the Meadowlands. But all the press out of New York with the Jets, who, by the way, are favored by 6. Zach Wilson, as we talked about with Patrick, we talked about all week, benched in favor of Mike White. We know Mike White. Last year, he started that game against the Cincinnati Bengals, played amazing. What was it? 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. Now he came back down to earth a little bit, had some bad games here or there. I think he played against the Buffalo Bills. That was his last start, and he threw 4 picks. But this is a Bears defense that has struggled mightily in the second half of the season. Ever since they gave up Roquan Smith, ever since they gave up Robert Quinn, really the 2 stalwarts on their defense, both gone, and it's been a colossal disaster ever since. So when you have Mike White stepping in, they don't have a whole lot of film on him. This is a Jets team that's going to rely on their defense, put them in good field position. Robert Saleh, the offense coordinator for the Jets, they're going to put Mike White in positions to succeed, not turn the ball over, not make mistakes. I think the Jets cover the spread. I think they win this game 26-16 over at the Chicago Bears, get back to their winning ways, get back to a 7-4 record and stay in the playoff hunt in the AFC. Heck, incredibly, stay in the division hunt in the AFC. So I got the Jets winning this game 26-16. A couple of comments here from Grady. He says, I can't believe Lovie Smith is still a coach in the NFL. I hope this doesn't come across controversial, but it seems like they've taken black guys over the last couple of seasons. They know they'll be fine. Won't be shocked if Josh McCown this offseason is there. That's a name that could come up with them quite frequently. The Texans, if they hire Josh McCown as their head coach. With Josh McCown, and he was the ultimate. He's like Ryan Fitzpatrick, the ultimate journeyman quarterback. Played everywhere. Feel like he played with half the league. You know, I think the thing that's funny with the Texans is their history with hiring minority head coaches, and it's not been great. And then it feels as if they're trying to make up for it by hiring, I forgot, David Culley, I think was the guy last year, now Lovie Smith this year. It's like, guys, see, now at this point, you're trying to win Deshaun Watson over, which they tried to do last year. And it's like, dude, there's some really good black head coaching candidates out there, and it felt like you just hired this guy and put him in a position to fail. That's what bothers me the most about the Houston Texans, which they're a poorly run organization, so why are we shocked? But putting these guys in position to fail time and time again, I hate it. I mean, there's still plenty of, what's his name? Todd Bowles was out there. Listen, Todd Bowles, we've had our criticisms of him as the head coach of the Buccaneers. You take him any day of the week over Lovie Smith. I think you would take even the Buccaneers offensive coordinator, Byron Leftwich, take him over Lovie Smith. So it's a matter of the fact that the Jets aren't, simply put, the Jets don't get it. Let's leave it at that. They don't get it. Never have, never will. It's a bad organization. Moving on now to the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Washington Commanders in our nation's capital. Commanders on fire right now. They're favored at -4 over Atlanta, who still has their playoff hopes very much alive. But looking at Washington, Taylor Heinicke has played really good football this season. Okay? You look at Antonio Gibson, who's ever since he's come in the NFL in 2020, I feel like he's been one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. That offensive line's played great for Washington. Terry McLaurin, we know, is one of the best receivers in football, one of the most underrated players in football. That defense looks like possibly it's going to get Chase Young back, and to me, that's the difference. Getting to Marcus Mariota, he's prone to make bad decisions here and there as the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. To me, this is a little bit of a dicey game, but Atlanta lost Kyle Pitts for the season. Cordero Patterson's been dealing with injuries. I think Washington is the safe bet at home, favored by 4. They win this game by a final score of 24-20 over the Washington wins 24-20 over the Atlanta Falcons. It is now time for Bryson's Bleak Bet. The one game every week that I have absolutely no confidence in, but I have to because, well, I just have to. It's NFL predictions. This one happens to be a Super Bowl rematch from years ago. And 2 teams sitting there with 3 wins. One of these teams is Grady. Just had to remind me in the comments. I picked to get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. That's, of course, the Denver Broncos. They're going to Carolina to take on the now Sam Darnold-led Panthers. So it was Baker, and then it was P.J. Walker, and then it was back to Baker, and now it's Sam Darnold. It's a mess. It's a mess in Carolina with the Panthers. Nevertheless, they're favored by a point in this game. It's gone back and forth. Broncos favored by 1, Panthers favored by 1. Right now it sticks at Panthers -1. Of course, I have no confidence in this pick because both teams stink. Both teams' quarterbacks stink. Okay, it's been a disaster. What I'm looking at, though, to me, what decides it is Carolina's defense has played decent this season. Okay, you look at last week, held a very good Baltimore offense to 13 points. They did hold the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady to a field goal. They've had their moments here and there. Now they've had some bad games, like against the Bengals and against the first game against the Falcons where they gave up 37. But I think they bring their A game Sunday afternoon, coupled with the fact that Denver is allergic to scoring 20 points or more. So I do not think they will score 20 points in this game. Carolina wins it in Bryson's Bleak Bet. Have no confidence in it. Betting on Sam Darnold, are you kidding me? But Panthers win this game. Oh, it says Panthers -4 there. Whoops, I'll have to change that. But Panthers, I think, win this game 25-15. I'll change that graphic later on when I upload it to social media. Moving on to the next game. And it is time for my upset of the week. Give me the Jacksonville Jaguars to beat the Baltimore Ravens. 22-17. Ravens are only 3.5-point favorites. Here's why I'm picking this. First of all, I think Vegas is actually previewing something by saying Ravens -3.5. Because what they're looking at is, okay, Jacksonville, and something very interesting for Jacksonville that I think matters. And it matters when you've got a very young team, which the Jaguars have. Defensively, they have really struggled getting to the quarterback. And so when you sit back and you look at the Jaguars, what do they do over their bye? Reportedly, they simplified the defense. It's young players. You simplified the defense, made it easier to understand. And now you're taking on a Ravens offense that isn't playing so hot. As I mentioned when I picked Carolina to beat Denver, those Baltimore Ravens didn't play too well offensively. They only scored 13 points against the Carolina Panthers on Sunday afternoon. Going to Florida, where the Jags, who, you guys know I really like Doug Peters as a head coach. Okay, I think he's an excellent head coach. Not great, but very good. Coming off of a bye, great coaches off a bye often win. I don't know, it's one of those funny games. I said Jacksonville would win 6 games, as I repeat over and over when I make these predictions. They'd win 6 games, but the majority of their losses will be close. To this point, only 1 loss has been by double digits, and that was to Kansas City at Arrowhead by only 10. No less by 10 points to the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm going to take the Jacksonville Jaguars in my upset of the week to beat the Baltimore Ravens. A little bit of a trap game for Baltimore, but give me the Jags to beat the Ravens 22-17 and at least keep their playoff hopes for the moment, somewhat alive. Let's see. We've got a few comments here. Grady asks, does Hackett get fired if they lose? My Panthers will win this game. They play hard for our interim coach. If we get 5 to 6 wins, he deserves the job. I agree. Does Hackett get fired? Honestly, Grady, I think they're just going to wait till the end of the season, to be totally honest with you. If they were disappointed in his performance to the point of firing him, they'd have fired him a month ago. He's been bad. Situationally, there's no creativity on the offensive side of the ball. Again, some of that is not the creativity part, but just the execution is on Russell Wilson, but it's also on Nathaniel Hackett. Not putting Russ, not putting his weapons in positions to succeed. Hackett will get fired after this season. Moving on to the afternoon slot. This is an interesting one. I almost had this as my Bleak bet game. You've got the Los Angeles Chargers going to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Now, the Chargers, despite being 5-5, despite only having one more win than the team that they're facing, the Cardinals, they're 3-point favorites on the road. Here's why I like Arizona. A, looks like Kyler Murray's going to come back. B, DeAndre Hopkins is playing out of his mind right now. I don't know what that corner, was it Ward, I think was his name, for the 49ers, calling DeAndre Hopkins steroid boy because he got suspended for 6 games due to PEDs. I don't know if he's been watching, but DeAndre's not just good because of steroids. Okay, let's not sound like a baseball analyst right now, because DeAndre Hopkins has 45 catches in 5 games. He's balling out right now. Whether it's Kyler throwing the ball, whether it's Colt McCoy throwing in the ball, this week it appears, according to the injury report, it's going to be Kyler throwing in the football. So, Cardinals at home. Here's the last reason I'm leaning Arizona. And it's the theory I've always had on the show. This is the National Football League. Okay, these are all professionals. These are the best football players on earth. They are very prideful and have big egos. And they got humiliated, talking about the Cardinals, on national television by their division rival, the team they hate. They lost by 4 touchdowns in front of a national audience on ESPN in front of millions of people. I always call it, it's the embarrassment theory in the NFL. That is why I'm leaning with the Cardinals. That is why I'm taking them to beat the Chargers 31-24. They get Kyler back. Again, this is not a playoff team. Arizona's not in the playoffs. To me, they're done. Their season's over. But for pride, they beat the Chargers 31-24. I'm sorry, you watch the Chargers, they're not playing good football right now. They're not playing, Brandon Staley's not coached well. Situationally, they've been atrocious. What's new? That's why I didn't pick the Chargers to make the playoffs this season. I still don't think they're going to get in. Cardinals win this game 31-24 over the Los Angeles Chargers. Moving on to the next game, you got the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Seattle Seahawks, another AFC West versus NFC West matchup. Seattle is favored -3.5 in this game. So you've got the Vegas Raiders coming off a highly emotional win. Obviously, you're coming off the week of Derek Carr getting emotional at the podium. A lot of questions about Josh McDaniels and his job security. There seems to be a disconnect off the field in the locker room between Carr and Devontae Adams. And what do? They come from behind on the road and win in overtime against their division rival Denver Broncos. So got a second straight road game, this time against Russ's old team, the Seattle Seahawks, who themselves are coming off of a bye. And Pete Carroll coming off a bye in his career has been excellent. Okay, you look at his history ever since the days at USC and even Seattle. Pete Carroll is almost unbeatable coming off of the bye week. You've got Kenneth Walker, who's running the football as well as any back in football this side of Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey. You've got an offensive line that is head and shoulders compared to what it was a year ago. Tyler Lockett's playing great football, so is DK Metcalf. And listen, Geno Smith's coming off of a rough performance. Trust me, Shane Waldron, offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, they've made adjustments. So, I think Seattle, this is the type of game to me where it's a one-score game, but similar to Cowboys-Giants yesterday, it's not as close as the score might lead you to believe it was. Give me the Seattle Seahawks 27-19 over the Las Vegas Raiders. They win this game 27-19 and continue their chase, certainly for a playoff spot, if not for the NFC West, which somehow they still have a shot for. Despite how talented San Francisco is, Seattle wins 27-19 over the Las Vegas Raiders. Moving on to a game which, man, was this not one of the games back in May that we circled on our schedule like, oh my gosh, I have to be in front of my TV for this game. The Los Angeles Rams and the Kansas City Chiefs. Remember that game they played 4 years ago in the Coliseum? It's the greatest Monday Night Football game of all time. The Rams won that game 54-51 over the Kansas City Chiefs. It was a crazy game. These two teams nearly matched up in the Super Bowl. Okay, Rams obviously took care of business against the Niners. If the Chiefs don't blow an 18-point lead versus the Bengals, We get this as our Super Bowl. And now, it is this, of all the games in the NFL this season, 12 weeks in, it's this game that has the biggest point spread in the NFL this season. Kansas City is favored to beat the 3-7 Rams, minus 15.5. Now, nobody's shocked Kansas City's favored. Nobody's even shocked by this line at this stage in the season. But who would have imagined that this being America's game of the week on Fox, we assumed 2 Super Bowl contenders. All the reason we're be tuning in this game is to see what's Patrick Mahomes going to do this week that we've never seen before. Like, he's gotten into that like Jordan almost. Like Jordan, every night he did something you're like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a basketball player do that before. Same with Mahomes. He does things every week that, simply put, other quarterbacks just are not capable of doing. So they're in this game favored by 15 against the Rams, minus 15.5. Listen, the Rams have injuries at quarterback. We're not even sure if Matt Stafford's going to play. Cooper Kupp is probably done for the season. Aaron Donald hasn't played up to par. The offensive line's been bad. And I'm supposed to believe that they even have a chance of covering in Arrowhead. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Kansas City big. Flip the score. 31-13 over the Los Angeles Rams. It's been a long season for the Rams. Trust me, it's going to be a long Sunday for the Rams. Chiefs win this game 31-13 over LA. Moving on to the next one. We got the New Orleans Saints taking on the San Francisco 49ers in the Bay Area. Niners big favorites, minus 9.5 to beat the Saints. Obviously, Saints coming off of a big win last week. Andy Dalton was actually first in the NFL a week ago in passer rating. His passer rating was like 140-something. So Andy Dalton, his confidence is riding high. Enjoy it. Enjoy it while it's there, Mr. Red Rifle. Because as J.J. Watt once put after a Monday night game in 2015, Andy Dalton's going to turn into the Red Ryder BB gun against the San Francisco 49ers defense. Okay? We know about the pass rush. We know about the linebacking core led by Fred Warner. Obviously, the offensive side of the ball, it's just playmakers galore. It's Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, all led by one of the best offensive masterminds in the sport. His name is Kyle Shanahan. Maybe you've heard of him. But this secondary has been sneaky good, okay? That kid that they got, Hufanga, the safety, he's everywhere. Whether it's making a tackle, whether it's picking off a pass, dude is all over the place. He's got great instincts. He plays the football well. You're not going to break a tackle against this guy. Keep an eye on number 29 in scarlet and gold for the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday afternoon against the Saints. Listen, I think the running game is going to be too much for the Saints to handle with Christian McCaffrey, with Elijah Mitchell. It's going to be a long day for the Saints. Jimmy Garoppolo plays turnover-free football coming off of his best game of the year. I'm going to trust the guy whose best game of the year comes with a stacked roster over a guy who is playing for a 4-7 team. Niners win this game over the Saints 34-16. They win this one easily. San Francisco 34-16 over the New Orleans Saints. Now for the Sunday night game. Okay? You got the Green Bay Packers and you got the Philadelphia Eagles. Green Bay in this game is a 6.5-point dog. I thought about taking the Green Bay in the points. I really did. Because it feels like a desperation situation for the Packers. They're 4-7, 10 days extra to prepare for Philadelphia. And then I remembered Matt LaFleur is the head coach. And then that's where I switched to Philadelphia to cover. Here's why. Eagles, obviously, with the least impressive win of the weekend, without a question last week, against the Jeff Saturday-led Indianapolis Colts and against Matt Ryan, I love Matt Ryan. Hang him up or be a backup. Hang him up or be a backup for Matt Ryan at this stage in his career, okay? But you're going to face Aaron Rodgers, who's had arguably the worst season of his career statistically in terms of team success. The Packers, obviously, it's not been there. The defense has let you down constantly. I mean, even the game where you're like, oh, Green Bay's defense stepped up. They still gave up 28 points against the Dallas Cowboys. They still gave up 27 against the Tennessee Titans, despite forcing a turnover off Ryan Tannehill. Green Bay against Philadelphia on the road is going to have to play nearly perfect to beat the Packers. And this is not a roster, and it's certainly not a coach that I expect to be perfect. Give me the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game easily over the Green Bay Packers, 28-15, in what could be, just throw this out there, what could be Aaron Rodgers' final game as a Packer quarterback. I anticipate if they lose this, they'll fall to 4-8. They'll give the ball to Jordan Love, see what he's got. As I said, it's a win-win for the Packers. If Jordan Love plays well, great. We've got a quarterback for the next decade. If he doesn't, well, at least we get a high draft pick because he's not going to win us a whole lot of games if he's bad. Because Aaron Rodgers has been bad, and you're 4-7. If Jordan Love's bad, you might just end up with 4 wins to end the season. So you can move on, trade Aaron Rodgers, get assets, and try and rebuild this thing. It's going to be interesting. Got Grady Edwards in the comments here. He says the Rams got fat and happy, man. This is the worst defense of a Super Bowl champion that I've ever seen. It's been bad. I mean, I understand 5-5, but 3-7, they might be picking in the top 5 of the draft. That's crazy. Well, they would if they hadn't traded just about every first-round pick they've had. That's the crappy part about it for the Rams. They stink, but at least a silver lining for teams that are bad, well, at least we'll have a top 10, top 5 pick in the draft. No, you're not. Now, you gave all your picks to the Jags, to the Lions. So, for Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, they've got the Rams first-round pick next year, so Detroit could get 2 top 15 picks. So, see if they can take advantage of that. Grady Edwards says, Aaron Donald and Sean McVay were talking about wanting to retire this offseason. This team should have broken up after the Super Bowl. Yeah, it seems like, well, for Aaron Donald, I think the retirement thing was more about getting that contract. Aaron Donald almost pulled an Aaron Rodgers. Talking about retirement so often just so he can get the big deal. Sean McVay, on the other hand, is really interesting. It's like, you're not even 40. You've had all the success 5 years into your career. You've been to a Super Bowl, and then you win a Super Bowl a few years later. Why now? Because the reports are that once the Rams kind of nucleus, Donald, Ramsey, who, by the way, Ramsey has been horrible this season. It's like every time I turn my head, he's getting beat deep. It's unbelievable. But once the Rams nucleus retires, Donald, Ramsey, Stafford, Kupp, once they're done, he's done. I have a hard time believing that. Maybe he retires. I know he's got a wife. I'm not sure if she's pregnant or not. I'm sure they have plans to raise a family. Focus on that. But who's to say 10, 15 years down the road, he doesn't get that coaching itch again? I mean, listen, Sean McVay is a very energetic guy. I don't know. He doesn't seem like the dude to just, especially at his age, just chill and play golf all the time. That's just my interpretation of him from afar. I'm just saying. Hey, listen. We'll see what happens with the Rams. They're not going to be a playoff team, obviously, in the NFC this year. That's been a foregone conclusion for a couple weeks now. But, man, I did not expect. Listen, if you had told me of my 2 Super Bowl picks, who'd have a better chance to have a bad season, I'd say Denver, because there's a lot of question marks with Denver. But the defending champs, oftentimes when we talk about a Super Bowl hangover, it's with the team that lost the Super Bowl. Just look historically. The team that loses the Super Bowl always has a disappointing year the next year. That's never usually the case with the champs. It is this year. I think 3-7. I think they said it was the worst record through 10 games, tied for the worst record for a Super Bowl champion in 10 games in NFL history. Rams have been hot garbage on the 4th of July, as I would say. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Be sure to catch Carving It Up live on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. The show is not going to be live. It's going to air at 6. Show's not going to be live on Monday or on Thursday. But after that point, don't worry. We'll be live all of Christmas break. Okay, I got one more week of my first semester of college. Looking forward to finishing that up. And then it'll be nothing but live shows on from there. So looking forward to getting to that. But also be sure to like, share, comment, and take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button. That's all it takes you. 2 seconds. Hit that big red subscribe button to subscribe to Carving Up. Hit the notification bell. Okay, be notified whenever we upload a new clip from the show, or one of those YouTube shorts that everybody seems to enjoy these days, or when we go live 3 times a week, Monday, Thursday, Friday. Be sure to also catch Carving It Up live on the Grid Network. Also, check out the Khaotic Sports Podcast. A big tip of the cap to Patrick Brown, the host of the Khaotic Sports Podcast. Check his show out. Khaotic Sports, the Khaotic Sports Podcast. Check my show out, Carving It Up. Also, check out the All Even Podcast, Rocket Fuel, Clutch Sports Talk, and the Cowboys Camp Fan Podcast. Check all those shows out on the Grid Network on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Grid Network on YouTube. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Spend some time with family. Enjoy those Thanksgiving leftovers, man. As good as Thanksgiving dinner is, Thanksgiving leftovers hit different. Those turkey sandwiches, that sounds good. Have a great weekend, everybody. Again, once again, a late happy Thanksgiving. God bless you all. Peace out. And let's go Vols tomorrow. Beat Vandy. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.